Over the last couple decades, JJ Electronic has made quite a name for itself producing a number of modern production vacuum tubes. But if you didn't know that they also produced a line of amplifiers, you're not alone. For some years, they've made a small volume of handmade amplifiers, mostly to showcase their tubes, but they're high-end pieces in their own right. Today we're going to take a look at their flagship preamp offering, the JJ Electronic 243. All right, so the JJ Electronic 243, let's take a look at it. First of all, just looking at the overall design of it, it's aesthetically very interesting. It basically is a nice piece of furniture here. Chassis basically consists of these nice chunky wood sides and front. There are nice dovetailed joints holding it all together. This one has an interesting sort of deep red stain to it with a gold top plate. There were a few different color combos, black and silver. If I could do it all over again, that may have served me better over the years, but this is an interesting look as well. You can see that there's a little bit of a patina that is formed on the top plate, even though it's still, hello, very mirror shine to it. I would say that a mix of just time and me some years back probably being a little exuberant with the polish definitely created this sort of patina to it, but what can you do about that? Now, in terms of design, you've got real simplicity here. Input selector, volume knob, nice chunky metal knob, has a nice feel to it. Up here, you've got a power supply in this box that is kept outside of the main chassis and away from the main PC boards. We will take a look inside this chassis. I'm not going to, however, take off the power supply box because it's kind of a pain. This emblem here is glued on top of where a bolt goes through, and this actually lifts off. But all you've really got is a power transformer here. You've got a small PC board with some filter caps over here, and it passes through a hole down into the chassis. There's some shielding under this box, and that's about all there is to say about the power supply, but I appreciate that they have done the high-end audio thing of keeping the supply up and out of the main chassis. As far as tubes, you've got two ECC82s and two E88CCs. Internally in the phono section, there are 4 more E88CCs. As far as the input selector, you've got your phono input and then your 3 analog unbalanced line inputs. Input selector is a nice switch. You can probably hear that nice chunky clicky feel to it, feels really solid. This weighs about 10 kilograms. That is what, 22 red-blooded American pounds. And it's definitely maybe a little bit bigger than it looks on camera. I suppose you can see my hand for scale, but it's a decently hefty, chunky piece of equipment. Definitely feels really solid, massive. Overall, just definitely a high-quality piece. Now, as far as the JJ Electronic amplifiers go, they're very much boutique amplifiers. They were sold, as far as I know, only in really small numbers. They did not have really broad, large-scale distribution. They were not making tons of these. This particular amp I bought, I think back in '03, so 22 years ago. This was one of the first ever imported to North America. I think it was something like the 11th or 12th unit in North America when I bought it. It's just such an unusual and unique piece. As far as how many total JJ Electronic ever made of these, I really don't know. If I had to guess, I'd probably guess hundreds more than thousands. Let's put it this way. And as you look around this, you can tell that it's a hand-built item. When we look into the inside of the chassis, really we're going to see that it was definitely not put together on a big assembly line. This preamp was really made to go in front of their monoblock tube amplifiers that they made. They had, if I recall correctly, some single-ended triode low power monoblocks, and then they had a little bit higher power monoblocks that were actually, it was kind of a dual mono inside a single chassis. And then JJ did also make a couple of integrated amplifiers, and eventually they had a dedicated phono section as well. Now, looking at the back panel I/O, first you've got the phono section inputs with the dip switches for the cartridge loading here. Here you've got your 3 unbalanced analog line inputs, input 1, input 2, input 3. Few interesting output options here. You've got up top here your amplified and regulated, that is volume level adjustable output. This is going to be your standard output here for most amplifiers. Next one down is the non-amplified but volume regulated. That's a useful one for if you've got an amplifier with really, really hot inputs. I have had to use that for a couple different amplifiers before. And then the last one is non-amplified and non-regulated. That's basically a pass-through from your inputs. That's probably going to be useful for like a tape loop or a CD recorder loop. In modern times, maybe not so useful, but a couple of decades ago, that was definitely still pretty relevant. Over here, you've got your phono ground, a main fuse for the power supply. You've got your power on-off switch back here, and then a standard IEC power plug for the North American market where I am. And that's about what there is to say about this rather simple preamp. Let's check out the inside of this guy now. Okay, and with the screws off, we could swing this bottom cover off. I'm just looking at these felt footers here. They're a little off center. I can't remember if I re-glued those or if that's factory, but I think it's factory. I feel like I would have centered those if I was the one doing it. You know, that's another indicator of the handmade nature of this amplifier. And as we swing off this really nice heavy-duty piece of steel, this is definitely high-gauge steel. It feels hefty. We see that we do have a hardwired ground here to the bottom plate, and over here we have a piece of foam acting as a retainer for our 4 phono section tubes. These are the E88CCs. Maybe I don't so much love the use of foam for that. Maybe some clip retainers would have been better. We have to remember that we're looking at this upside down, so in terms of heat dissipation, these tubes are hanging upside down in normal operation, and so the heat would be going up towards the PC board. To that end, I really wish that there was a little bit better ventilation, some ventilation on the sides or on the top of this, and maybe it would have spoiled the look, the aesthetic a little bit, but functionally, I think it would have been a little better for not trapping heat inside this chassis from those tubes. To that end, about 12 years ago, I did replace all of the electrolytic capacitors in here. Reason was, if I remember correctly, I went to go change out some new phono section tubes, and I did notice at that time that a couple of the original capacitors were bubbling a little bit. That's a surefire sign that you're about to lose some of your capacitors. So I just went ahead and replaced all of them. I used Panasonic FC and FR series, high temperature, low ESR, very good capacitors. I've used thousands and thousands and thousands of those in different projects and always had great luck. And I'm pleased to see that even though it's been some years since I've had this amp opened up, boy, all those caps are looking great, and I have no doubts that they're all still well in spec. So in terms of design in here, you do have all polypropylene capacitors in the signal path. There are no electrolytics in the signal path at all. Certainly in high-end audio, that is what you want. You can tell that this has all been handmade, hand soldered, hand wired where there's wiring needed. It's all a very tidy looking assembly, and gosh, I don't know. There's it's a pretty clean layout in the PC board here. Everything is very simple. There's nothing really super esoteric, I don't think, about this circuit design. Just good quality components and a decent layout. Here in the middle, we have our Alps volume potentiometer, and that's connected to a really long connecting rod that goes to our volume knob here. Really has a nice feel to it. Smooth, weighty. I love that kind of thing. And I think that's something that you really get with the higher end equipment, is that nice tactile feel. Smooth, pleasant, solid, chunky feeling stuff. This whole thing just has a nice weight and feel to it, and you can tell that it's not just made to a certain aesthetic, but to a certain level of quality that you would expect to see in equipment of this cost and caliber. So it's using pretty good quality RCA input and output jacks. Over here we have our wall power input, and then there's wiring that goes up towards the top part of the amp to the power supply. And in here, of course, we've got all of our line signal and Phono Stage components. And that's pretty much of what's going on in here. Okay, so you've seen the inside of it and the outside of it, and we've talked about what features it has and what it can do. So there's just one more thing to cover, which is how does it sound? Now, there's a couple of ways to do this, and neither of them are perfect by any means, but one way is I can just tell you what my subjective experience is about how it sounds. And the other would be to try and share some clips of it with you. And in hopes of trying to keep everybody somewhat happy, why don't we just do both? So first, I'm going to give some royalty-free clips in a few different genres of music, and I probably don't need to tell you that there's no great way to do this on YouTube. Reason being, I have to send the music out through a loop that ends up resulting in a couple of different analog to digital, digital to analog conversions. The other issue is the interface that I use for my computer to make these videos is a professional audio interface, and those run at a different operating level than do the consumer level devices like the JJ Electronic preamp. So that means that you get a level mismatch, and you need to use a transformer to make the two different signals play happy. Well, by the time you do that, you've added all kinds of coloration to the signal. So I don't love doing clips on YouTube, but let's try this out. I'm going to give you the clips, basically A and B. One is going to be through the entire loop I just described, through the JJ Electronic preamp, and then the other is going to be that same loop with the same digital conversion, the same level transformer, just without the JJ. And by comparing the two, you can kind of get an idea, maybe, hopefully, for some of the character that the JJ has. And then we will talk about it. Now, I don't know that you're going to really hear much of a difference in these clips if you're listening on, for example, the tinny speaker in your smartphone or your iPad or laptop or whatever. So I would not get your hopes up there. But if you happen to be watching this video and listening through a pretty good system, you should hear some slight differences. So check these clips out, see what you think, and then we'll regroup and I'll tell you all about what I have heard from this preamp and my experience with it in various systems over the years. Okay, so for better or worse, that's what it sounds like. Now let's talk about my personal experience and my subjective opinion about this preamp. It does a lot of what you would expect from a piece of tube equipment. It definitely adds some smoothness, especially to the top end of things. You get a little bit of that tube sparkle on top. I think it sounds especially nice on acoustic music, jazz, that kind of thing. But really it works fine for any type of music. You get a little bit of that weight in the lower mids that people like about tubes. With that being said, as far as tube equipment goes, it's not the most colored sounding preamp I've ever heard. It's probably on the clean side for tube equipment. The other comment I would have on it is that it doesn't really take away from your signal, and that's really what you want from a piece of high-end equipment. You should never lose resolution, and I don't think that that happens with the JJ. You still get a really terrific soundstage out of it. A very nice soundstage from that preamp is what I've heard, regardless of the system I've had it in. It's as good as the amplifier you have it in front of and the source that you're plugging into it. It only adds just a slight bit of that tubey character, and that's about it. So really, it's been a pretty good preamp through many different system permutations, and I've auditioned it in front of many other amps besides what I've owned. I've had it in front of both tube amps and solid-state amps, and gosh, just off the top of my head, I've had it in front of a few different Conrad Johnson all-tube amplifiers. I had it in front of, for several years, some Manley Labs monoblocks, tube monoblocks that I owned for several years. As far as solid-state amps goes, too many to honestly remember her name, to be quite honest with you. But I think the ones that stood out to me, I've had it in front of Bellis amplifiers, Blue Circle Audio solid-state amplifiers, Hafler, Rotel, Bryston, just more than I can even remember, but lots of really good and interesting solid-state amps. Mark Levinson, gosh, I couldn't even begin to remember everything I've done with that thing in the last couple of decades. And for the most part, it's always sounded about the same as what I've described through anything. That really is its character. There have been one or two occasions where I plugged it into an amplifier and the synergy just wasn't there. With the wrong amp, I think it has once or twice sounded a little bit kind of dull and flat sounding. So, you know, if you've been at this hobby for a while, you know that some things just don't have synergy with one another. Some amplifiers just don't have that chemistry together, you know, and I think that can happen with any amp, and it has a couple of times with this one. But for the most part, I've never been unhappy with how this thing has sounded in systems. Now, as far as the built-in Phono Stage, I can't share clips on that because if I start playing records through it and put it on YouTube, I'll get copyrighted. So you'll have to take my word on this one. But the Phono Stage really just sounds like how I've described the rest of the line stage. Same character. The Phono Stage definitely is high quality. I've never really been inclined to upgrade it. I use a very good analog front end for this thing, and I have never really been wanting for more. It's a passive RIAA network and 4 tubes, and all it does is take your phono signal and brings it up to the level that you need, and gives a little bit more of that sort of tube characteristic, real rich sounding, nice body, nice weight to it, little bit of sparkle. Terrific soundstage from my records through this Phono Stage, and yeah, I've been pretty happy with it. Now, with that being said, you need to give it the right cartridge. It really needs to be, I would say, if you're using moving coils, 0.8 millivolt or more. That would be the real lowest I would go. So if you're using a really low output moving coil cartridge, it's not going to be enough gain, and you would either need a step-up transformer or to use a different phono section. But I think this one really works best with higher output cartridges. I use a high output moving coil with it, and absolutely excellent performance out of that, more than enough gain for that kind of thing. So as long as you're supplying it with what it needs, it does have the cartridge loading options, but really you're going to need that medium output or higher from it. I would say even the medium output moving coils, probably you would pick up a little bit of noise as you have to crank the volume knob up a little bit more with that stage. So I would definitely recommend supplying it with a higher output type of cartridge for this amp. But if you do that, boy, it's a terrific sounding phono stage. Really very nice and very flattering to the signal that you're giving it. Personally, I have been for some years now using a Benz Micro H2 wood body cartridge. Sounds awesome through this phono stage. Very, very musical, real rich, real nice. I've been real happy with that. But really any moving magnet sounds great, or any higher output or upper medium output moving coil. Terrific phono stage out of there. So that's what I can tell you about the JJ243 preamp. You just don't see these things out there very much. I don't think I was able to find anybody else who'd made a video on one of these. So here you go, YouTube. I hope this gives you some insight to the JJ Electronic preamp. It was available for many, many, many years, and I'm not sure that it's still in production anymore. For the longest time, it used to have a web page, sales page from the same shop that I bought it from, but that has now disappeared. So I'm assuming JJ has taken these out of production, even though JJ Electronic does still list their amplifiers on their own website. I don't know when that was last updated, and I don't know if you can still get these. I can't find any web pages that are offering them for sale, at least in North America. So hopefully this has given you some insight on the very unusual JJ Electronic 243 all-tube preamp. Definitely a unique and interesting beast, and I hope you found this one interesting. If you have ever heard one of these, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Let me know what you thought about it. Were you impressed? Were you not? Definitely very curious. And if you didn't know these things existed, drop me a comment about that too. I don't know that a lot of people know these amps, even if they're familiar with the JJ Electronic tubes. I'd love to hear what you have to say about it. If you enjoyed this video, throw me a like. I always appreciate that very much. If you want to hear any of my other big stupid hot takes about all things audiophilia, consider subscribing. I always appreciate that very much too. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I will see you in the next one.